I don't like the idea of being watched when I don't know about it, and I especially don't like the idea of being watched when I'm sleeping. But that nightmare becomes a reality for the person who sent us today's second story. Out there in Pisgah National Forest, in North Carolina, something is watching people in the dead of night. A whole lot of somethings. This is Unexplained Encounters, a show about allegedly true stories from real people about terrifyingly unreal encounters. Have a story of your own? Send it to me at darkstories.org. Want to support the show and get bonus stories? Sign up for premium membership over at erie.fm. Thank you. Now, let's begin. The Man on the Porch, from J. Louis 89. My brother is 9 years younger than me. When he was a teenager, our house became the place where he and his friends always wanted to hang out. They'd come over late, eat everything in the kitchen, and talk too loud. And, for some reason, always wanted to watch the scariest movies they could find. This event happened a little over 12 years ago, when I was around 24. I've had weird experiences before, the kind you can explain away if you try hard enough. But this one has never set right with me. Even now, after all this time, I can still see it perfectly when I think about it. To this day, it's the strangest, most singularly haunting night of my life. That night, my brother Tyler had two friends over, Gavin and Eli. They had decided to watch The Fourth Kind, which, if you've seen it, you know it's not exactly the movie to end your night on. It's one of those films that gets under your skin. It leaves you glancing at windows, listening to every little sound in the house, feeling uneasy for reasons you can't quite explain. By the time it ended, it was around 3 in the morning. Gavin lived close enough that he left on his own, trying to act tougher than he probably felt. But Eli lived a few blocks away, and after the movie he looked genuinely shaken. He tried to laugh it off at first, but then he asked me, almost embarrassed, if I would walk him home, because he did not want to walk home alone. Of course, being the older brother, and being 24, I had convinced myself I was pretty brave, so I gave him a hard time, teasing him, calling him ridiculous. I even asked him if he thought aliens were hiding in the bushes, but I grabbed my shoes and walked him home anyway. At first, I treated the whole thing like a joke. I kept messing with him the entire way. I was trying to make him more uncomfortable, just because I thought it was funny. But the further we got from my house, the more the mood began to change. The night was darker than it should have been. There was a full moon out, but somehow it wasn't helping. The light looked thin and weak. Maybe there was a thin veil of clouds making it worse. The whole street, too, had that dead, empty feeling to it, where every house looks asleep and every window has its blinds or shutters closed. In that kind of quiet and deadness, all the smallest sounds seemed too loud. When we got to about 3/4 of the way to Eli's house, I stopped and pointed ahead. "All right," I told him jokingly. "You're good from here, right? No alien abductions in the last 30 feet, as far as I know." He didn't argue, but he didn't laugh either. He muttered something under his breath and took off running the rest of the way to his front door. I remember watching him sprint under the porch light, fumbling to get inside, thinking how stupidly creeped out that movie had made all of us. Then I turned around and started to walk back home, alone myself. That was when the feeling hit me. If you've ever walked somewhere at night and suddenly felt like you weren't alone, you know exactly what I mean here. It's not the sounds at first or a sight, just a shift, a quiet primal certainty that there is something out there aware of you. I had just turned onto my street when every hair on the back of my neck stood up. I slowed down, not even realizing I was doing it. I began to scan everything around me, moving my head way too much. The parked cars, the dark yards, the windows. And then I heard it. A creaking sound. Slow and rhythmic and sounded like wood. I turned toward the sound. At the very end of the road, on the porch of the corner house, there was a man sitting in a rocking chair. I froze for half a second, because I honestly wasn't sure if I was looking at a real person or some trick of the dark. He was sitting perfectly still except for the chair, which moved in that slow back and forth motion. He had on what looked like an old straw cowboy hat, and even from the street, even in the low light, I could see his eyes. They were open way too wide, so wide I could clearly see the whites around them, and he was staring directly at me. Not in that casual way people glance at someone passing by. He wasn't curious or tired or distracted. His eyes were locked on me, watching me. I remember doing a double take, almost expecting him to vanish when I looked again. But he didn't. He kept on rocking. Now, when I get scared, it usually comes out as anger. That's just how I've always been. So instead of doing the smart thing and getting the heck out of there, I started to walk again, slowly, trying to act unbothered, and trying to convince myself this was just some old guy sitting on his porch in the middle of the night, even though nothing about him felt normal. Trying to sound casual, I called out, "Kind of a weird hour to be sitting out like that, huh?" No answer. Just that chair creaking. It felt louder every time, like it was filling the whole street. I kept walking, kept my face forward, pretending I didn't care. But then I said louder, with a fake laugh in my voice, "You know, if I didn't know any better, I might be offended by your lack of communication." But there was still nothing. No movement or greeting, not even an acknowledgement. By that point, I was more irritated than anything else, or at least that's what I told myself. I had grown up on that street. I knew the houses, and I knew the people who lived in them, or I thought I did. I swear on everything, though, I had never seen that man before in my life. Something about that got to me. So, against my better judgment, I glanced over. That's when I saw he was smiling. Not a big smile. That probably would have been less disturbing. This was a small and tight, subtle smile. Just enough to show me that he knew I was scared. Just enough to suggest that he was enjoying it. His eyes looked even wider somehow. The whites of them caught the moonlight in a way that seemed unnatural. And that rocking never stopped. Back and forth and back and forth. Slow and patient. That was enough for me. I muttered, "Nope," turned and walked as fast as I could without fully running. Then, after a few steps, I dropped the act and sprinted. I did not stop until I reached my house a few blocks away. By the time I got there, my heart was pounding, and I was more shaken than I was ready to admit. I kept telling myself I was overreacting. The movie had gotten in my head. Some creepy old insomniac on a porch was not exactly evidence of anything supernatural. I went up the driveway, trying to calm down, then remembered I had left my vape in my car. Back then, I made a point of hiding it from my brother and his friends. I didn't want them picking up the habit just because they saw me doing it. So despite every instinct telling me to get inside and lock the door, I turned around and I walked back to the car. I opened the door, leaned in, grabbed it from the center console, and started to shut the door. That's when I felt it. A hand on my shoulder. So very cold. Icy fingers pressing through my shirt and into the muscle beneath. This was not my imagination. That was real. I cannot fully explain what that did to me. I've been scared before, believe me. I've panicked too. But I have never in my entire life felt fear quite like that. It was so total. My whole body locked up on me. I could not turn around, and I couldn't even breathe properly. I can't even remember what my mind was doing. I just stood there between the open car door and the driveway, staring into the dark interior of my car. I'd already shut the door, and the driver's side window was right there in front of me, black and faintly reflective. All I had to do was lift my eyes a little, and I would have seen whatever was standing behind me, but I could not even do that. Some instinct deep inside me said that whatever was there, I did not want to see it. So I stood, frozen, listening to the sound of my own breathing, too shallow, too fast, feeling that unbearable cold on my shoulder, waiting for something even worse to happen. I'm not sure how long I stayed like that, but it felt like years. Certainly it wasn't that, but it was long enough for my legs to ache, and long enough for my eyes to water from staring unblinkingly for so long. Finally, with every bit of courage I had left, I turned. There was nothing there. No one in the driveway or the yard. No one. The hand I'd felt so vividly was gone. And the second I realized I was alone, my body unlocked all at once. I ran inside so fast I nearly slammed into the door frame. I locked every door in the house and grabbed the first thing that felt like a weapon. My choice was a kitchen knife, and I sat by the front window for who knows how long. I kept expecting to see him, that man in the hat, standing across the street or sitting on my porch or still rocking in a chair, but the street stayed empty. The morning after that, I told myself I'd gotten scared by a horror film, and I let my imagination run wild. I left for work around 7 a.m. as usual. As I drove down my street, though, I passed the same house at the end of the road. But this time, I saw an ambulance parked outside. That stopped me cold. Later that day, I called my mom and told her what happened. I even described the man on the porch. The hat, the chair, the staring, the smile. Then I asked if she knew who lived there and why there had been an ambulance at the house that morning. There was a pause on the line. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. "He passed away sometime early yesterday evening," she told me. "They didn't find him until this morning." I remember gripping that phone, asking her to repeat it, because I thought I must have heard her wrong. But she said the same thing. The man who had lived in that house had died hours before I ever walked Eli to his house. Hours before I turned onto my street. So to this day, I don't know what I saw. Maybe it was the spirit of a dead man. Maybe it was something wearing his face. I still have no explanation. None at all for that hand I felt on my shoulder. Ever since then, I stopped looking in that house's direction. I've always been afraid, when I pass by there, that I might see him again, with that very slight but knowing smile. National Forest Scare. Glowing Eyes. From Anonymous. Back in 2017, my buddy Noah and I were having a sleepover at my dad's house. Noah and I enjoyed anything outdoors. We would often go fishing, explore a creek that was in my dad's backyard for miles, and wander through the forest along a trail that was also in my dad's backyard. We really didn't see anything out of the ordinary, but this one night, since we had both recently gotten our licenses, we decided that the next day we should go camping. So we got our parents' permission, and we proceeded to get all excited, packing our backpacks for the camping trip the next day. In the morning, we drove out to Pisgah National Forest in North Carolina, about 2 hours away from where my dad's house was. We had been there many times before during the day to go fishing and to swim in the large creek/river that runs through the national forest. So, after driving a ways up the mountain and into the woods, we came across a trail that led to some campgrounds. We got out of Noah's old-timey Jeep and began to hike through the trail, trying to find a good spot to set up camp. We hiked that trail for what felt like all day, about 3 to 4 miles in. Eventually, we stumbled upon an opening of flat land with 4 to 5 trees surrounding what looked like an old burnt campfire, and we thought that was the perfect spot. There was a little trail right next to the campsite that led right down to the water so that we could do some fishing, catch some fish, eat them for dinner. That's what we did. We both caught a few trout each. We cleaned them and cooked them and had a very nice evening, ending it with talking about life and what we wanted to do with our futures. Eventually, the sun began to set, and we decided to set up our hammocks. It was roughly March or April, so the weather was perfect. It wasn't rainy, and it wasn't too hot or too cold. All we had were our hammocks and a sleeping bag to put in the hammocks. So we found some trees that were parallel to each other, roughly around 20 to 30 feet apart. Noah and I set up our hammocks, and after all that hiking, fishing, and activities from the day, we tried to get some shut-eye. We got in our hammocks, and inside our hammocks we got in our sleeping bags. I remember hearing Noah's sleeping bag zip up, and it sounded like he was passed out. The forest then was completely silent. I was in my bag too, zipping it almost all the way up. I liked having a little bit more fresh air. After about 25 minutes of trying to fall asleep, I noticed a slight glow coming from outside my sleeping bag. I figured it was just maybe the coals from our fire, glowing a bit still. So I glanced over at the fire. There were no coals. The fire had gone completely out. Not a hint of light remained. But when I looked up and looked around us, there were glowing eyes of all sorts of colors in the trees around. 5 sets, each in a different tree. It almost looked like glow-in-the-dark paint had been sprayed on these trees in a very detailed manner, but for some reason, the eyes felt more 3D and real. I'm not sure how to describe it, but this was not paint or stickers. The next thing I noticed, I hesitantly looked up at the trees my hammock was tied to, and sure enough, there were more sets of eyes on the trees right above me, beaming down onto me. I let out a soft whisper to Noah, trying not to freak him out, and asked, "Noah, do you see this?" He said, "What? I'm trying to sleep." "Just look around. Look at the trees." He did with a little unzip. He saw them, and he said, "What the heck is that?" "I don't know, but I don't like it," I told him. I chuckled, trying to be positive and cheerful, but deep inside, I was terrified. Noah had always known me as the friend who wasn't as scared as others. But Noah, on the other hand, was scared of what seemed like everything. So when I seemed even a bit frightened, that really freaked Noah out. He said to me, "What do we do? What do we do?" I said as calmly as I could, but sternly too, "We need to leave." Something was telling me we had to get the heck out of Dodge, and fast. So we quickly got out of our sleeping bags and calmly, but as fast as possible, packed all our things. I tried my best not to look at the eyes. We then proceeded to head out with our dim flashlights that were not meant for hiking 3 miles through the wilderness on a poorly kept trail. As we headed out of the campsite, I wish I didn't, but I looked back one more time. The eyes had gotten even brighter and had almost all turned towards us as we were walking away. When I tell you we had it in high gear, we were out of that trail in what felt like 20 minutes. We were breathing heavily but trying to be quiet enough that we could hear our surroundings in case we were being followed. The forest was still eerily silent all the way out. We finally made it back to Noah's Jeep. Once inside, we sat there and looked at each other. Then we looked at the time. 3 a.m. Noah seemed like he was on the verge of tears, and I was trying to reassure him that we were fine. What was important was that we got out and didn't stick around to find out what they were. We made the 2-hour drive back to my dad's house, arriving around 5:30 a.m. Together, we agreed to never go back to that spot again. In recent times, I've returned to Pisgah National Forest to go camping with a different group of friends. I've never experienced anything like that again. But I still wonder, what were those eyes in the trees? Did we stumble upon some weird ritual? Were we about to be victims if we had not left that instant? These questions still haunt me to this day, 9 years later. If you go out there, Just make sure to be aware of your surroundings at all times. You don't know who or what could be out there watching. Big Island, Hawaii, from Big Island Girl. Just a quick note, this story contains the phrase unco them, which is, as I understand it, Hawaiian pidgin for my uncle and the rest of them. So stick with me because I want to keep this story authentic to what was written, rather than trying to localize it too much. I have a kind of creepy encounter with something in Hawaii, Big Island. My grandparents and unco them have been taking me hunting since before I was in elementary school. I got my hunting license when I was 10. I always thought seeing pigs charge at you and goats getting defensive was normal and fine. I grew up knowing how to hunt and fish, and I wasn't like any other little girl. I didn't grow up playing with Barbies or putting on makeup. I grew up learning the ways of the ocean and the mountains. My family always takes me hunting at Puawa and Puanahulu. It's a 15-minute drive from our house in Kealakehe. The hunting season is from March till October. We go pig hunting whenever we can, because there's no specific hunting season for pigs. Every year, my grandparents or unco them drive 15 minutes from my grandparents' house all the way to Puawa and Puanahulu. Or if I'm staying with my uncle Bry, we take the 4-hour drive, because he lives in Ka'u. It started out like any other day. I was 14 years old, and I could not wait for the hunting season to start. Every year, me and my unco them would try and see who could shoot either the biggest ram or goat. When someone shot the biggest one for the season, everyone would look up to them. But it started out like any other day, and I was ready for the hunting season in 2 days. I woke up early that day, at 3:30 a.m., but something felt off. I shrugged it off. I didn't want anything to get in the way. Me and my grandparents took the 15-minute drive to Puanahulu. Once we got there, I could tell something was off right away. When the sun came up, everything was so quiet. No goats, no birds singing. It felt like the world had just stopped. We were driving on a road along the highway, and my grandmother saw this white thing. It looked like a goat, but it was small, so we couldn't be sure, but we let it go. After that, I had a bad feeling. My grandparents stopped. Then I went after a goat. But something was off about it too, because it didn't look much like a goat. It had one black horn sticking straight up from its head, and I don't know how to describe the body. It put its head in a rock and it came back up, and it looked right at me. And what was weird is that its eyes met my eyes exactly. I know people might think I'm crazy, but hear me out. This was not my first encounter with something like that. When I had just turned 10 years old, my grandparents took me hunting. My papa had his crossbow, and Billy, a male goat, ran straight at him, stopped, turned back around, ran, jumped in the air, and straight up disappeared. I know people might say, what if it jumped in the grass? What if you weren't watching? Well, there was no grass. We were watching, and it just disappeared. My grandmother always told me it was the spirits of people who died there, but I'm not sure if I believed all that. But back to my story. When I saw the goat after it put its head in the rock, it just went right back to what it was doing. I shot it, and it ran, and we had to cut the throat so it didn't suffer. 15 minutes after we cut the throat, watched it bleed out and die. I swear to you, that goat tried to stand back up. Then, after an hour and many cuts later, it was still alive. This goat's head was almost all the way off. The only thing keeping its head to the body was a little bit of meat and skin. We cut it one more last time. It got up and attacked me. I had bruises from this. My grandmother had to shoot it with a gun, and only then did it finally go down. Call me crazy if you want, but I wasn't the only one who saw this. Hawaii is not just paradise. There's much more to it than that. Skinwalkers on my uncle's farm. From Raven. Before I start, I'd like to give a quick introduction to myself and the land on which this story takes place. I'm an 18-year-old guy, about 5'9", decent build, and a skeptic. This happened on my uncle's farm. He has about 500 square miles of land. We mostly use the woods for hunting, camping, and fishing. If you walk a good 400 to 500 feet into those woods, you can find a pond, and that's where we fish. Anyway, he lives in the deep parts of West Virginia. The houses are widely spaced apart, and it's about a 3-hour drive to get there from the nearest gas station. I hadn't seen my uncle in about 2 years, as he had been battling with some mental things I'd rather not mention here. The last interaction with my uncle was, as I said, about 2 years back. He had been rambling about tall, slim creatures that stole his animals. At the time, I was skeptical and did not believe any of it. Now I wish I would have listened. As we drove, all that you could see for miles was farmland, much different from the New York bustling streets that I grew up knowing. I am an outdoorsy person, though, and I'm hoping to get a job as a forest ranger or something in that area. Anyway, we got there at about dawn, and my uncle, who was already up, immediately ran to my dad, hollering about something. "It's here! I heard it! It took the cows!" My dad again told him to calm down, but my uncle wouldn't budge. As they argued, my focus drifted away from them and to the nearby trees. Something or someone was peeking out. Something with long, slender claws and deep sunken eyes. And when I blinked, it was gone. I blamed it on tiredness, and we went inside. My plan was to wake up at 7 that morning and head out. I wanted to spend a few nights in the woods. My parents reluctantly let me go. I had to go while my uncle wasn't looking, though, or he would have been freaked out. After walking for a while, my legs started to get tired. So I sat down on a nearby log, listening to the sounds of nature, when a twig behind me suddenly snapped. That sounded too heavy to be a deer, yet too light to be human. And then I heard something.
Vin.
My uncle always calls me that. My full name is Vincent, but my friends call me Vinny, and my uncle calls me Vin. But something was wrong with his voice. It was raspy, like a smoker who had never drank any water, or had anything to drink in a while. It repeated,
Vin.
But this was a playfully malicious tone, something my uncle never did.
Vin, come here. Your parents want you back home.
Confused, I shouted back. But Mom said that if... I was cut off by the foul smell of something dead. It hit my nose. I leaned against a tree and threw up. It was like hell warmed over, nasty, foul, and that's when I saw it. Not but 30 feet away stood that same thing, or maybe another one. It seemed to smile. Rows of sharp teeth revealed. I didn't know which way to go, but my instincts told me to run like hell, and my feet seemed to carry me against my will. By the time I finally stopped, it was nighttime. I couldn't remember the way back. I didn't even know where I was. All I knew was that I needed to rest and clear my head. I set up my tent and started a fire, praying that would keep whatever the heck that was away. Then I heard my name again.
Vin?
My mom's voice, but also filled with malice. I slowly turned my head, but to my surprise, there was my uncle's old sheepdog, the one he said that one of the creatures took. And something was wrong. As I reached my hand out to pet him, I noticed his limbs were a bit too long, his eyes too dark, more predatory. I stepped back as it smiled, those same teeth again, and breath like death. I ran. I left everything behind and just ran and ran directly into my uncle, mom, and dad. My mother was crying so hard, she hugged me tightly. But my dad, his jaw hung open, and my uncle's eyes grew wide. My dad slowly reached up his hand, pointing at something behind me, and as I turned around, my face drained of color, because there in the shadows stood Max, the sheepdog I mentioned earlier, now on 2 legs, grinning ear to ear. And behind it, several more of the same creature. My uncle dragged all of us back to the house, slamming the door. He explained what he thought they were. Skinwalkers, he said. Humans who had done horrible things for power. He lit a cigarette, and he said with trembling hands, "Mostly they're believed to be Navajo doctors or witches who killed someone in their family to take the form of anyone or anything, and they can mimic voices. That's how they got that dog of mine." "You people need to get out of here before they come back," he finished, putting the cigarette out and standing up. "Now." So we did. We left. Soon after, my uncle moved out. I wish there was more to the story, like some grand ending, like we killed them all. But we didn't. The story ends there. A shadow roams an office at night. From Anonymous. I don't want to go into much detail about what I do, so I will explain the details in a way that won't give away my profession. I don't work there anymore. I live and work in a very populated city. Very New York, very Chicago, if you want an idea. My work building, though, is located in a quieter neighborhood and beside a very poorly lit park. Basically, the streetlights attached to the outside of my work building are what light up the whole park. The reason I am bringing it up is that I had a corner office. The office was also really big and had an odd layout, since it was once 2 offices turned into 1, and it faces the park. During winter, when it gets dark early, it gets pretty dark outside. Like I mentioned earlier, it was 2 office spaces turned into 1, with an odd path and an awkward floor-to-ceiling island. This company had different departments, and there was always someone opening a department and closing the department. I was closing my department. For some departments on my floor, they had standard office spaces. Some of the equipment from other departments was stored in my office. At the end of the day, it wasn't uncommon for people to be coming in and out of my office. When we usually close, the cleaners start turning off the lights in certain areas of the building. My office was in the middle of the building, and it looked down a part of the building that gets turned off early. Something that my upper management didn't like was when cleaners entered rooms, especially during our working hours. It's something I personally didn't mind. It never distracted me from my work, and with some cleaners I was very friendly. The "how was your day" and "the weather, eh?" type. I noticed, though, more and more, that they would always start from my office. It wasn't uncommon when some of the coworkers' partners would come and pick them up during winter when it got dark early. Sometimes their kids would run around to use the washroom. The washroom was 2 doors down from me, so I heard everything. I also know some of their young kids. They often tried to scare me or run into my office from time to time. While I was standing near the door packing up my things, I saw a dark shadow about a child's height run out of the room, out of the side of my eye. I noticed it because, given the time of day, a shadow doesn't really cast like that near my office door, so it caught my eye. Someone had to be that close for the shadow to be that noticeable. I quickly ran out after it, thinking it was a child who may be lost. I called out, "Hey!" playfully, thinking they were leaving without saying hi. I wanted to make sure that they were headed toward the offices, where I knew their parents would be. Those offices aren't close. The 2 offices where parents work with children were at the ends of the office. They'd still be running down the hall when I poked my head out. It made me think maybe they were tiptoeing in my office. I checked my office closet, and there was no one in there. That space would have been the only space where a child could fit. I called those offices and asked, "Hey, are your kids here? Are they in your office? I swear I saw a kid run out of an office over here." Someone replied that they hadn't. They were alone. And another said no. So I called the front secretary, who would have seen anyone come in and out. "Has anyone lost a child? I think I saw a child running out of my office." They responded that no one should be in here at this time. Right as I was walking out, the cleaner I'm friendly with walked in. So I asked him, "Hey, were you in this hall the whole time?" He responded, "Yeah, I was just in the office next door. Is there an issue?" I replied, "Have you seen a kid run by? I saw a shadow run out of my office." His eyes widened. He said, "By the lighting and reflection, if the shadow went out, that means they were coming in. There's no one else in here with you, right?" He started to open all the doors, and there was no one. As he was looking around, I said, "I'm pretty sure no one else is in here with me." He radioed to get some help on our floor, in a tense posture. I asked him, "What happened?" He told me he strongly believed there was some spirit in the building, particularly in the cleaning closet just outside my office. He said he would turn on music out loud when he was working alone. Every time he stood in front of my office or that closet, it would turn off, and his phone would restart. It was not a bat. From Hagoromo Kitsune. Growing up in the provinces and small towns of the Philippines, adults constantly warn you about aswang, or other mythical creatures. These stories are meant to keep you from staying outside late at night. While they are terrifying to hear, for most folks, that is all they ever are. Stories. However, my family is no stranger to the supernatural. Growing up on a less developed island during the 90s and early 2000s, I learned to believe in these creatures, without ever having seen one firsthand until my first encounter. I still don't know what exactly it was, but I am certain of one thing. It was no bat. I was about 8 years old, enjoying a normal evening with my father and sisters. We were watching The Lion King, a childhood favorite I insisted on watching every night before bed. In the middle of the movie, the neighbor's dogs began barking frantically. Curious, I peeked out the window. Although the alley was empty, the barking continued. The area was well lit by street lamps, but after a few seconds, I saw a shadow move around a corner. My young mind was spooked. I quickly closed the curtains and returned to the movie. As we continued watching, I realized I needed to use the bathroom. At the time, our indoor bathroom was dark and intimidating, so I asked my father to open the back door so I could go outside instead. He accompanied me to the backyard to keep me safe while I did my business. Our house sat directly behind my aunt's 2-story home. As I stood there, I looked up at the sky. It was a clear night, though not particularly starry. That's when I noticed something gliding over my aunt's roof. It moved like a kite, gliding in a circle. At first glance, it looked like a massive bat, but I grew up watching Animal Planet, and I knew how bats flew. They don't glide in silent circles like that. And this thing was enormous, with vast bat-like wings. I called out to my father, pointing at the sky. His reaction was immediate. He whispered but a single word. "Aswang," and he pulled me toward the house. As if it had heard him, the creature glided right towards us. I felt a powerful rush of wind and a distinct whoosh as it descended. Just as my father slammed the door shut, a deafening bang echoed through the yard, like something very heavy had crashed into the fence. Outside, the dogs began to howl and cry. Through the gap in the curtains, I saw a human-like silhouette pass by our window. Terrified, my sisters and I screamed and ran to our parents' room, waking our mother. She huddled us under the blankets while my father went back out to investigate the noise. In the backyard, he found our 5 large barrels, which had been full of water, knocked violently to the ground. The next morning, my mother went to her sister's house to recount the night's events. It was then that I remembered a crucial detail. My aunt was pregnant at the time. My mother told us that my aunt and her husband had heard distinct walk-walk noises throughout the night. While I don't recall the specifics of their personal encounter that night, I know the situation, to them, was very serious. The next day, my maternal grandparents arrived. My grandfather was a well-known albulario, or folk healer, in our small town, brought in to handle the aftermath. This was my first encounter with an Oswong, and certainly would not be my last. It's the reason I believe in the supernatural, and why my family still carries these stories today. The Woman in My Room, from Dr. Birdbait. This story is a bit of a short one, but I'd say that's a good thing. And it's thanks to my parents, who listened when my sister and I needed help instead of just brushing it off as nightmares. My family has always been sensitive to the other world, or other side, mostly on my mother's side. This would usually just be dreams of something that would happen, dreams of a past life or death, and occasionally seeing through other people's eyes. It was strongest with my sister and me. When we were kids, we would see things, sometimes visions that would scare our parents, sometimes seeing or hearing people that weren't there. There was one time when I was 5, in my car seat, and I told my mom, "Watch out for that truck." Seconds later, a truck came over the hill, halfway into our lane. Another time, we were on the interstate, and I told my mom about a vivid scene of a little boy at the beach. He was making a sandcastle a ways from his parents. A man started to come toward him, and he was so scared. It's safe to say my mom was freaked out when I didn't tell her what happened to him. But the worst experience was one that my sister and I shared. I'll call her M for this story. When M and I were kids, from when my sister was born to when she turned 8, my little sister and I shared a room. My grandmother, on my father's side, was into the occult and ghosts back then, going to haunted places and even communicating with spirits. Apparently, on one of her visits, she brought something with her, and she didn't bring it back home with her either. Shortly after she left, my sister and I began having night terrors, both of the same woman. Wild black hair, pale skin, a cruel smile, and an unnaturally tall frame. I would usually repress it and not talk about it, but my sister would wake up screaming. There was one night my mother came up to our room to comfort her. She was standing at the foot of her bed, hugging her, when M said, "There's a lady in the corner." My mom was immediately on alert and asked M to describe her. "She's got long, messy hair and white skin," she said. My mom, believing her right away, spoke up, not even looking. "You are not welcome here. Get out of my house." The next day, she and my father saved the house, went to our church and got the priest to bless some gems to keep by our windows and doors. My mother made a point to tell our grandmother that if she ever wanted to come back and spend time with us, she couldn't be messing with things that could put us in danger. Since then, we haven't had any other instances. We still see things on occasion, usually just a man on the stairs or in the closet, but nothing malevolent. I'm just thankful that my parents took us seriously, instead of just assuming we were having regular nightmares. If there are parents listening to this, I have to ask you to listen to your kids when they warn you about something. Scientifically speaking, children have great gut sense and sensitivity to things that are threats. They have not yet been desensitized by the modern world and still have that base instinct. Even if it seems far-fetched, your attention to their matters could mean the difference between a safe night's sleep or something much, much worse. Man in the Hallway, from Johanna, J.L. I've posted here previously. I'm an 18-year-old female. Even though I live in a new apartment, actually my third apartment, the building is on the older side, built in the 50s. During the time I've lived there, I started to experience more and more encounters, given that I hadn't had one since 2019, and now they seem to be starting up again. There's this person walking through the hallway every Sunday, maybe around 2 o'clock. He walks to the window, and I see his shadow, and as soon as I do, the room goes cold. He sometimes looks at me. My brother sometimes hears it, and sometimes I hear faint sentences coming from him. He sounds confused that I can see him, but I never see him anywhere else. Well, except what happened in February. I'd seen him already a few times when I got sick. I was sick a month, very weak feeling. I saw the man for the first time outside of the hallway. He was standing at the doorway of my bedroom that I share with my brother. I was lying in my bed, shivering with a fever. The man, now that I could clearly see him, was about 182 centimeters, 6 feet, I think, and he looked to be 50 years old. He stared at me for a long time, remaining silent for most of it. But eventually, he did speak. I'll translate this, as he had spoken in Finnish.
I hope death will not stain this house again.
Then he left. I got up, startled. For someone who has predicted people's deaths, it was startling to hear a spirit talk of death, especially when you were the one sick. I stumbled to the living room, dizzy and hurting more than I knew I should. I found a thermometer after some time. I had a high fever, over 40 Celsius, or over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. I sent a picture of it to my mother, who came to get me to a doctor. I deteriorated in the next few hours. I had to get a lot of antibiotics, and I scared my parents pretty bad, understandably so. I had to have hospital care for a few days, as the high fever took its toll on my body. I keep wondering what would have happened if I had ignored the man, given that I had deteriorated in mere hours and was even having chest pains while in the hospital. If I hadn't been driven to alert my mother, I may not be here. I would have been home alone for at least 6 hours until my brother would come home from school. Imagine how worse my condition might have been by the time they found me. When I got home 2 days later, I didn't see the man for some time, though one time he did appear briefly in the doorway, but it almost looked like he was checking on me to see if I was okay. Then I saw the man go back to his Sunday routine of walking through the hallway to the window around 2 p.m. Sometimes he stops, looks at me, and I swear there's a smile on his face, like he knows I listened to him, that I hadn't made some mistake. I keep seeing him around. He doesn't seem evil or vengeful, but now I like to leave something on the windowsill on which he leans, a little gift or tribute. I've asked the landlord about it, but she looks at me scared and switches subjects, so I assume the elderly in the house know about him. He usually wears a blue fisherman's shirt. His legs, though, are too translucent to see what he wears as pants or whatever. His steps are silent, too. I only realized he's there because the temperature plummets every time, and because I can see him whenever I look up. But he walks the hallway like clockwork, every Sunday around 2:10 p.m. And I'll keep watching, keep listening, because he may have saved my life. Foreign Recapture. From Anonymous. Between 2012 and 2016, I volunteered at a bird banding station in northern Wisconsin. Bird banding is where you string up fine mist nets at dawn, carefully extract whatever songbirds fly into them, and crimp a small aluminum band around one leg before releasing. Each band carries a unique 9-digit number, registered with the Federal Bird Banding Laboratory. The data goes back over a century. It's how we know things like where warblers winter and how long chickadees live. The answer to that last one matters here. A black-capped chickadee in the wild typically lives 2 or 3 years. The verified record is around 12. On a cold morning in September of 2014, I pulled a chickadee out of net 6 that was already wearing a band. That's called a recapture, and it's usually mundane. Most recaptures are birds we banded ourselves the previous week. But I didn't recognize the number's prefix, and neither did my friend Kev. Kev had been running the station and had been banding since the Carter administration. A bird banded by some other station is a foreign recapture, and those are rare enough that Kev came over to read the band himself. He read it twice, wrote it down, then read it again. The prefix belonged to a band size and series he said he hadn't seen issued in decades. The strange part was the band's condition. Aluminum bands wear. They dull and pit and the numbers soften. This one was bright. The stamping was crisp, like it had been crimped that spring. We photographed the band, took the standard measurements, and let the bird go. That's protocol, and we assumed the database would sort it out. Probably a misread digit. Maybe an old band from somebody's leftover stock, used improperly. The bird banding laboratory's reply came as a phone call, instead of their usual automated certificate, which Kev said had never happened to him. The bird's number was valid. It had been issued in 1962 to a station near Pellston, Michigan. Their record showed it had been placed on a black-capped chickadee in October 1963. Kev asked them to check for a clerical error. They'd already checked. He asked whether bands from that series could have ended up unused in circulation. The person on the phone said the schedule sheet showed that specific band deployed with full data. Wing measurement, weight, age class, the whole 9 yards. Then the man said something Kev repeated to me word for word in the parking lot. "It's crazy. The measurements you gave us match the 1963 card. All of them, to the gram." Chickadees are sedentary. They mostly live and die within a few miles of where they hatched. Pellston is almost 300 miles from our nets. But honestly, the distance never bothered me that much. Birds can do strange things. What bothered me was the lifespan. 51 years? Kev couldn't leave it alone. That 1963 bander was long dead, but his field notes had been donated to a university biological station. And that winter, Kev drove out and got photocopies of the October pages. He mailed me one. I still have it. It shows temperatures, net hours, species tallies, and the band number we caught was in there. Dated October 9th, 1963. Chickadee. Age-coded as AHY, meaning after hatch year. An adult of unknown age. In the remarks column, where most entries say nothing, the bander had written, "Same bird as 58? Band was lost then. Can't be." But the eye. There's no banding record from 1958 to compare against. Whatever he caught that year, whatever made him write that, he apparently never reported it, or the record just didn't survive. So the trail just stops there, one rung further down than anyone can climb. People ask me what I think this is about. I don't really have a theory that I would defend if I was sober. A misidentified band requires the federal database, the schedule sheet, and our photographs to all be wrong in the same way. A hoax requires someone to have stolen a band in the 60s, kept it pristine for half a century, caught a wild chickadee, crimped it on with proper technique, and released it near our nets on the chance we'd recapture it. All for no payoff since we never went public. The remaining explanation requires a songbird that does not age. And I'm not going to be the one to say that out loud in front of ornithologists. Here's the detail I keep returning to, though. When you hold a chickadee, it fights you. They're feisty little birds. They peck at your cuticles and scold the whole time. This one lay in my hand, completely still, and even looked at me. Not the quick saccadic glances birds make. This one held its head steady and kept one dark eye fixed on my face for the entire process, maybe 4 minutes, and the only time it moved was when I reached for the pliers to check the band's crimp. It shifted its leg towards me, like it was presenting it, like it had done this many times and knew which part I needed. I told myself it was stress torpor. Birds can go still when scared. We released it at the banding table and it didn't burst away in a panic the way they always do. It flew about 20 feet to a low spruce branch, settled there, and watched us until it went back to the nets. Kev ran that station 2 more seasons and checked every chickadee with real attention. We never caught it again. But the year after he retired, I heard the new crew pulled a banded chickadee from net 6 with a number that didn't come back right. and that the lab asked them politely not to resubmit it. Evil porch guys, immortal chickadees, and watchers in the woods. You're welcome for all these new boogeymen to watch out for. That chickadee, though, might be the scariest one. Imagine what he's seen, what he knows. Or maybe it's just a cursed person transformed and forced to live the bird life forever. Sounds kinda sick, though. Good night. Thank you for listening to Unexplained Encounters. I've been your host, Darkness Prevails. You can send me stories at darkstories.org. And if you don't want to wait till next week, I've got another show called Tales from the Break Room, where I read scary work-related stories. Till next time, everyone, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.